Hi, in this video we'd like to talk to you about design strategy, how you can implement design strategy, and what kind of applications you can use design strategy for. So let's jump right down into it. What is design strategy is all about? Well, in business, many companies face different challenges in many different areas and business units. And these challenges often cause the companies to become disintegrated and all of its business units work separately. But this is where design strategy really comes into play. So on one hand, on a higher level, design strategy can help companies organize their different business units and manage cross-functional dynamics to integrate them into a solid structure. So in a nutshell, what design strategy comes really down to is a tool. Design strategy is really a tool that can help companies answer fundamental questions such as what products to make, how to make them, and how can they innovate in the market over short and long term. So why use design strategy really? Design strategy can really help companies gain a strategic advantage in decision making to decide what to do and how to do it. Design strategy can help the companies wear the different hats of the customers and competitors, and then they can see and assess situations from their perspectives. It can also help companies in many ways outsmart competition by anticipating their next move and plan how to be one or several steps ahead. In many situations, companies feel that they don't have a choice or they have to go down a specific path, but then the design strategy really helps them create choices where there seems to be none. So how can we implement the design strategy? Well, we can break it down into three simple steps. Identify, assess, and decide. The first one is really about identifying who your stakeholders are and what are their alternatives. The second is about assessing how these alternatives interact together and what kind of outcomes of these interactions will come into play, not only from your perspective, but also from the perspective of your stakeholders. The third is simply deciding what is the best plan of action. So let's dig deeper into the first step. When we're talking about identifying stakeholders, we have to think about a lot of different groups, from customers to regulations to interest groups to our different competitors, whether they're big or small or even potentially new entrants. And then we have to think about what kind of alternatives these groups have. So let's examine this process using Cola Wars. Coca-Cola and Pepsi have been fighting almost over a century now, trying to be a market leader. And so the main objective that we'll use for this example is increasing the market share. So to identify the different alternatives that Coca-Cola and Pepsi have, we can come up with a couple of options. For example, we can work on increasing the marketing expenditure, focus on the pricing structure and change it accordingly, focus on public relations, partnerships, change the product, or create a new product, all in an attempt to increase the market share. So in order to simplify the process, let's just focus on the first option, which is marketing expenditure. So let's assume that Pepsi will act first. Pepsi has really two alternatives, either to increase the marketing expenditure or to keep the level of marketing expenditure that they have maintained so far in the market. Now in reaction, Coke can also increase the marketing expenditure or maintain the level of marketing expenditure that they have kept so far. Now we can see that there are four different possibilities that can come out of this process. The first possibility, if both of Coca-Cola and Pepsi increase their marketing expenditure in the same proportion, the market share remains. If Pepsi increases its marketing expenditure and Coke maintains it, Pepsi's market share increases while Coke's decreases. If Pepsi maintains its marketing expenditure while Coke increases its marketing expenditure, Pepsi loses market share while Coke increases its market share. If both maintain their marketing expenditure in the same proportion, then the market share remains the same. Now, this analysis clearly shows that while increasing the marketing expenditure doesn't give Coca-Cola or Pepsi a competitive advantage and doesn't really help achieve our original objective of increasing the market share, both of them have to do it in order to not lose any market share. There is really a fourth step, which is repeating this process. First, consider different proportions of expenditure. For example, what happens if Coke increases their marketing expenditure by 20% while Pepsi increases theirs by only 10%? Second, you can consider multiple rounds and simulations of the same option and compare the results to see if they are consistent. And finally, of course, what we've just gone through is doing this process for only one alternative, which is marketing expenditure. So you should go back and repeat this process for all of the alternatives that we identified originally. Now let's consider a practical example of design strategy using war games. Now, in order to explore how design strategy was implemented using war games in this example, we'll just start with a little bit of background. You might have heard about Obama's Affordable Health Care Act that was passed in 2010. This act mandates a number of health reforms and changes that are meant to increase the options of individually sponsored health insurance coverage. And now the main issue that comes with that is the fact that the law doesn't get passed till 2014 and only the minimum basic requirements have been defined so far. And that has created a lot of uncertainties for insurance companies, and those companies found themselves facing a lot of difficult questions, such as what kind of individual policies should the companies develop to govern these regulations, and what should the company invest in to develop new products to match these regulations, and actually when should they start investing in these products. The two main questions that the companies have identified which needed to be resolved right away was first, what kind of strategies should they implement? And the second, when should they start implementing these strategies and start their investing? Should they wait till 2014 after the law is passed, or should they start doing it right away? And now let's start the game. The first step of the game is actually structuring teams, and in that example 75 key executives were identified to play the game, and these executives were placed in 8 different teams with different roles. And in that example 4 different roles were identified: national payer, sponsoring payer, local payer, and new entrant. And now let's see how the game was actually played. And so for the sake of simplicity, we'll just focus on one question, which is when should the companies invest? Which means that we have 2 alternatives. One is before 2014 and the second is after 2014. And so the game was played in 2 rounds. Each round is dedicated to one scenario. And in each round, the different teams came together and started brainstorming about many areas such as marketing, product portfolio, pricing, operations, and risks, contingency plan, and so forth. And each team thought about these areas from the perspectives of their assigned role. And so in round 2, this process was repeated, simulating when the law is passed and thinking about all these different areas and strategies at that specific point in time. Now, after each round, different teams came up with different plans and alternatives that could be implemented in each situation. And so in the second phase, the teams come together and start assessing these alternatives, asking key questions such as, what is the most likely scenario to happen? What is the most efficient solution that we can go for, and where can we get our highest leverage and return on investment from these solutions? After playing the games, many interesting insights presented themselves to the company teams. For example, teams that played different roles came up with very different strategies because they were thinking from very different perspectives. And the results in each alternative and each scenario varied dramatically. And what also was very interesting in that case is that in many cases, the players based their decision in anticipation of what the other player or what the other team might have decided to do. And so in the example we've just covered, we've seen how war games really help the company implement design strategy. But then there are many other questions that the company should answer in thinking about the war games. For example, the company should think about what kind of team members should be in each team, how often should the company be played, and the company should also try altering the teams and play different rounds and see if the results that came up were consistent. Now that we've explored what design strategy is and how we can implement it, you should think about your company's current position in the market and where you can apply design strategy in order to plan your next We conclude our presentation on design strategy, and we hope that you have enjoyed it.